Anyway, it's good to be home. In every man's life, there's one person who makes all the difference. This is a summary statement of a movie that came out last November, The Emperor's Club. You know, I love movies about heroic teachers. And this thesis statement on the poster advertising the movie outside of the theater caught my attention. And I thought, oh good, another West Side Story or a To Sir with Love. Well, the movie did take a kind of a twist that was kind of unexpected. In the movie, William Hundert is a teacher in a United States boys' school. Hundert values character more than anything else. In fact, he thinks that character is the only thing that matters in life. He's a passionate classics history teacher, and he believes that studying the Greeks and the Romans is more than just a study of the past. It's a study of character. Hundert believes that it's his role as a teacher to not just educate his boys, but to actually mold their character. Because Hundert believes that the future of this country rests in its leaders and their character. Fall of 1972, Hundert finds his comfortable world of teaching come crashing down by the arrival of a new student, a freshman, Cedric Bell, son of a Virginia senator. And almost immediately the teacher and the student become embroiled in a tug-of-war of wills with repercussions that would actually reach a quarter of a century later. Sedgwick openly defies the hallowed hall's rules and challenges his teacher's authority. No other student before him has ever dared to go skinny dipping with the girls from the school across the lake, nor to challenge Hundert's emperors and liken them to the Seven Dwarfs and the Beatles. Hundert decides he needs to pay a visit to Cedric's father. Discovers that this father has absolutely no time to raise his son. In fact, he discovers that his father, the senator, has no scruples of his own. In fact, his father tells Hundert, just teach him history. Don't try to mold my son's character. Well, when Hundert meets Cedric's father, there's suddenly a bond between him and Cedric, because apparently Hundert's father was kind of emotionally absent too in his life. And so all of a sudden, Hundert finds himself just being impossible to leave this guy alone. Inside, he just wants to help Cedric out. And so determined to help him out, he calls kind of a friendly truce with the student. And he begins to see that there's a noticeable change in Cedric's attitude. And then Hundert begins to bend some of the rules of the school himself in order to gain Cedric's trust. And soon Hundert begins to compromise. One compromise leads to another compromise, until he finds that his noble efforts to change the character of Cedric is actually having a profound influence on his own character as a teacher. Hundert becomes faced with a King Solomon decision that's going to determine the fate of Cedric and many others. Hundert, for all the right reasons, finds himself making a wrong choice that's going to have repercussions for the next 25 years. Ask yourself this question, because I think every day we face it. Does making a wrong choice for the right reasons make it a good choice? It's an issue that we face on a daily basis. See, The Emperor's Club is really a movie. In fact, I don't think it was really that popular, because it's kind of too squeaky clean and it's got too good of a moral to it to be too popular in this day and age. It was a movie that was made in reaction to the growing number of scandals in politics and in corporations, corporate affairs of this country. You know, people who thought that the end justified the means. The collapse of the energy giant Enron was the largest bankruptcy and one of the most shocking failures in all of United States history. I mean, this company in just 15 years came from absolutely nowhere to the 7th largest company in the world, employing over 21,000 people in 40 different countries. But the firm's success was actually resting on a cleverly disguised scam. You see, Enron lied about its profits. In fact, it stands accused of a whole range of shady dealings, including concealing debts. You know, so they wouldn't show up in the company's records. And as the depth of the deception started to come clear, investors started to pull away, and Enron had to seek Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Former Enron chief executive Jeffrey K. Skilling, during a congressional testimony, said, "I did not believe the company was in any financial peril. I absolutely, unequivocally thought the company was in good shape." What he really meant was, I know nothing, I see nothing, I hear nothing. Jay Leno joked about it on the late night show. He said, "This past Sunday, former Enron CEO Ken Lay went to church in Houston. On the way out, a reporter asked him how he thought it was going to work out. And Lay said, 'With God's help, we'll get through it.' To which the devil said, 'Hey, I thought we made a deal.'" I wonder if Ken Lay ever came across this text in the book of Proverbs. God cares about honesty in the workplace. Your business is his business. Leno also reported that the CEO, Jeffrey Skilling, married one of Enron's secretaries. Like Leno said, it's amazing how romantic these Enron guys get when they realize that wives can't be forced to testify against their husbands. Skilling said she was the best secretary Enron ever had. She could shred 950 words a minute. I wonder if Skilling ever heard in his church words such as found in Proverbs 19:1. Better to be poor and honest than rich, a rich person no one can trust. Let's dial up Enron and see what kind of a answering service they have.
Thank you for calling Enron. Please listen closely to the following options as our menu has changed. If you wish to serve a subpoena on a current or former Enron executive, press 1. If you are an Enron shareholder and would like to learn how to turn your Enron stock certificates into decorative origami, press 2. If your Enron 401k plan is worthless and you'd like some tips on how to survive your retirement eating nothing but mac and cheese, press 3. If you are an Enron executive and would like to find out which prison inmate, press 4. If you would like to invoke your constitutional right against self-incrimination, press 5. If you are Dick Cheney, press 6. If your company is looking to hire someone to record your voicemail menu options, please press 7. Or stay on the line and an operator will assist you. Thank you for calling Enron, the world's greatest company.
Anyway, the internet is really making a heyday of Enron, still are. In 1991, James Patterson and Peter Kim released this document titled "The Day America Told the Truth." Now, basically what it was is a study, an extensive survey in which everybody that filled out the survey was guaranteed of their anonymity. But the truth of the participants was absolutely shocking. I'll just give you a few of their findings. 91% of Americans lie regularly, at home and at work. Regularly. Most American workers admit to wasting time, and this is the average time wasted by American workers, 7 hours a week. That's almost a whole day. Half of the workforce admits that they regularly call in sick when they're perfectly well. Well, you know, some of us Christians might be feeling kind of smug and looking down our noses and saying, you know, I wouldn't do it. I'm a Christian. Not so fast. Some other authors did a study too, both Christians, and they did their own sampling of the populace, and they built their own embarrassing case based on hard evidence. According to their book, Keep Your Ethical Edge Sharp, they found that the general ethical conduct of Christians only slightly different from non-Christians. No question, depravity is alive and well among Christians and non-Christians in this country. You know, one time I had a parent say, I think probably at least 2 or 3 times I've had parents say this to me. You know, my son or my daughter, they might lip off the teacher, they might cheat on an exam, but they would never lie about it. Yeah, sure. You know, one time there was these three boys that arrived at school late, and the headmaster said, why were you late? And they said, well, flat tire. Oh, the headmaster said, I see, flat tire, eh? So he separated the 3, and he called them in one at a time. He said, which tire was flat? Didn't take long to figure that one out. So I remembered that story, and when I was on discipline committee recently, I said, this is the way to do it. You talk to them individually and you see if their stories match, and if they match, you can trust them. So, brought in this one guy, said, where were you after school on such and such a date? Oh, I was at home. I left school straight home. Yeah. You weren't at school at all? No. You weren't in the back hallway behind the gymnasium at such and such a time after school? No, I was long gone. I was at home. Oh, did you know that we have a hidden video camera in that back hallway, and that you were seen in that hallway on that date at such and such a time? That's not fair. You should tell me that you have hidden videos in the school before you ask me those kind of questions. Anyway, there was another researcher, and he did a study on the reasons why people lie. And here are some of them, and there's a long list: to coerce, to avoid, to be tactful, to make people feel better, to prevent perceived harm, to get what we want, to get people to like us, to appear reasonable, to justify, to deceive, to avoid blame, to have power, to support the best interests of others, to keep up appearances, and of course for national security. And you know what? Some of those seem like pretty good reasons, don't they? But does making a wrong choice for good reasons make it a good choice? In the movie, Hundred wanted so badly for Sedgwick to succeed and have a totally different attitude change that what he did was he fudged on an essay, scoring an essay. And he made sure that Sedgwick ended up in the top 3 of the class. Because this way, Sedgwick would be able to enter the Julius Caesar contest. And that was a very prestigious role to play in that school, to be one of the 3 entering the Julius Caesar contest. The teacher made a wrong choice for the right reasons. Very honorable reasons, you might say. He thought that if Sedgwick could just taste some kind of success, that, it would just boost his whole attitude and his self-esteem. Have you ever tried making a wrong choice for good reasons? Trying to predict the future? Only God can predict the future. We can't predict the future. That's why God has a fixed objective to which we measure right and wrong by. He doesn't ask us to decide right and wrong by our prediction of how the outcome will be. Well, one thing that Hunter, I guess, didn't really calculate as far as the future goes he didn't really calculate an immediate response, an outcome, and that was the devastation of that student who took 4th place instead of his deserved 3rd place. Martin Blythe was his name. Martin Blythe had his heart set on being in that Julius Caesar contest because his own father had won the contest when he was a student at St. Benedict's. And he worked so hard and he tried so hard, and when he saw his name was 4th on the list, he was just devastated in his heart. But he was a good loser. But Hundert saw that look of disappointment, and it just stabbed him in his heart, realizing that it was his wrong choice that caused that pain in Martin Blythe. But Hundert didn't realize the full impact of that choice for 25 years. Honesty and integrity are a lost virtue in colleges and schools these days. Now with the internet, it's so easy to cheat. I mean, even in our government exams, the rules are, even this year, the rules are even stricter in invigilating our provincial examinations. I mean, you can't bring anything into that room, and you can't even go to the bathroom anymore as of this year. Other years you had to follow a student to the bathroom, watch them, and follow them back. Something we didn't really like to do, but now you can't even leave the room. We're having a tough time in our society with integrity. One time I got a paper back from a student, his assignment, and it must have been late at night because he'd copied somebody else's assignment, including the other student's name at the top of the page. Let's take a look at this Calvin and Hobbes cartoon. There we go. Calvin calls home. I am at school. Are you all right? What's the matter? Why are you calling? I told the teacher I had to go to the bathroom. Quick, what's 11 plus 7? Kinds of unique ways of doing it. At Vanderbilt University, Madison Surratt, longtime Dean of Men and teacher in the math department, has his own words on display in a building that was named after him. This is what it says. Today, I'm going to give you 2 examinations. One in trigonometry and one in honesty. I hope that you will pass them both. But if you must fail one, let it be trigonometry, for there are many good people in this world today who cannot pass an examination in trigonometry. But there are no good people in this world who cannot pass an examination in honesty. You know, we can always justify our dishonesty when we don't feel that we're doing anybody any harm, right? It was Jesus who said, "Do for others what you would like them to do for you." This is a summary of all that is taught in the law and the prophets, he said. And you know what? When it comes right down to it, we detest people who lie to us, don't we? Oh, it may be a small lie, or it may be a larger lie, like on the scale of a lie told to many patients who trusted that the pharmacist was dispensing them drugs that would prolong their lives from cancer. You remember the story? The pharmacist was convicted of diluting cancer treatment drugs, which resulted in the early death of many people. You know what really ticked me off? Was when I learned the reason that he did this. He had 2 reasons: to pay back taxes and to make good on a pledge of $350,000 that he'd made to his church. Can I hit you right there? Well, Professor Hundert inflated Sedgwick's scores, and Sedgwick made it into the Julius Caesar contest. But near the end of that contest, Hundert, who was giving the questions, caught on to the fact that Sedgwick was cheating. They had to dress up in their Julius Caesar robes, and just inside the toga, he had answers to questions. When Hundert perceived this, he immediately had to think fast. And he decided that he would throw a trick question out that would guarantee that Sedgwick would fail. And he did. So Sedgwick failed, and another student took first place in the contest. And then Hundred made another compromise. It was Hundred's duty to report any cheating in this contest. He chose not to report Cedric. Now you may think, oh, isn't that grace? I mean, isn't that kindness on the part of Hundred? You may think so. But even that had its fruit 25 years later. The student went on and became a millionaire, president of some corporations. After 25 years, he decided to invite the entire class to his mansion, where he would have a repeat of the Julius Caesar contest. He thought he could win this time. And so the entire class and their families now, children and Hundred, all gathered at Cedric Bell's mansion. He even had a special helicopter bring Hundred in, land him right there in his own private golf course. And Hundred began to think, maybe Cedric, maybe this all helped. Maybe he did help Cedric after all. I mean, he seemed pretty successful. Maybe he'd finally gotten through to Cedric. And during the rematch, however, Hundred discovered once again that Cedric was once again cheating. Only this time he had a little implant in his ear and a little stooge at the back there sending messages via radio waves. When Hundred figured this out, he once again played a trick and made sure that Cedric flunked and came in last. And once again, Hundred decided not to expose Cedric's dishonesty. However, Cedric took advantage of the situation to announce his candidacy to run as senator, which kind of stabbed Hundred in the heart. So later on in the restroom, Hundred confronts Cedric about his cheating. Unknowingly, neither of them knew that Cedric Bell's son was in one of the bathroom stalls. It's one moment in the movie I'll never forget. You know how it is when you're in an audience and you're watching a film and when there's laughter, everybody's laughing and you don't really kind of notice what's going on? It's dead silence. And then when that boy walked out, the entire audience went, oh. You just feel in that room the disappointment, the heartache that results from something like this. There's always a price to be paid for dishonesty. Hundred begins to consider the price that he'd paid for his own dishonesty. And all of a sudden, the load of guilt that he'd carried for 25 years became even heavier. In fact, he had to seek out Martin Blythe right there at that occasion and confess what he had done. And told him that, Martin, you would have been third place, but I failed you. Forgive me. This is where the story kind of ends, like To Serve with Love. It does have a good ending, because Martin Blythe, at the end of the story, drops off his own son at St. Benedict's to be taught by the great Hundred Mulder voice characters. In our society, there doesn't seem to be any more moral absolutes anymore. The Bible isn't considered to be a standard or a guide for behavior anymore. And our society is kind of like a rudderless boat for that reason, on an open sea. The Bible does have a lot to say about honesty and integrity. It's mentioned numerous times, but there are numerous accounts or stories of people, even godly people, God's friends, who are dishonest. Let's just kind of go through them really quickly here. Some of them at least. There was the bold-faced lie, Cain killed his brother, Abel. God comes along and says, Cain, where's your brother? Oh, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? And then there's the rationalization lie. Knowing the ruler of Egypt would covet his beautiful wife and maybe even kill him to get her. Abraham reasoned that it wouldn't really be lying to tell the ruler that she was his sister, because after all, she was his half-sister. He thought he was going to save his life and maybe hers too. Or the one in Genesis 27, the premeditated lie, the one we talked about in kids' church the last few weeks ago. Jacob and his mother, they work out a very clever scheme to deceive their blind father, the blind father Isaac. To lie, to make Jacob look like he was Esau, to get the birthright. Oh, Jacob reasoned, why not? God had promised it to me anyway. Didn't he predict it? I just got to help God out a little bit here. What pain and heartache it caused Jacob and his mother. Or how about the circumstantial lie in 1 Samuel 21 and 22? David tells a lie to save his own skin, his own life, but it backfires. And it ends up that because of David's lie, not only the high priest, but 84 other priests and their wives and their children are all killed. 2 Kings 5 tells about a greed-based lie. Elisha, God's prophet, he gave Naaman some instructions from God to be healed of his leprosy. And Naaman was healed, and he returned to Elisha and said, I want to give you something. And Elisha said, no, I didn't heal you. The God of heaven healed you. I don't want to take any of your gifts. Oh, but Elisha's servant, Gehazi, he overheard, and he caught up to Naaman, and he said, oh, my master's changed his mind. He wants the gifts now. Well, Gehazi ended up with the same leprosy that Naaman himself had been cured of. Or in Acts 5, the little white lie, it wouldn't hurt anybody. Ananias and his wife, they held back some of the money from the sale of their property, and then they claimed they gave it all to God. 3 hours later, both he and his wife were carried out on stretchers. Philip Yancey, in his book, Reaching Out to the Invisible God, points out that withholding the money wasn't the problem. Peter had assured them they didn't have to give any of it. It was their choice. The problem was that they misrepresented themselves spiritually. God can forgive sin. He can deal with any spiritual condition. We fall down, we get up, right? But God requires honesty when it comes to personal sin. We dare not misrepresent ourselves to God. As Yancey says, God cannot give grace to closed hands. And it says in 1 John 1:9 that if we confess our sins, He's able to forgive us from all unrighteousness. He wants to pour His grace into our hands. We just have to be honest and just admit and ask for forgiveness. Chuck Swindoll, in his book, God's Grip of Grace, he describes how Peter had to learn the value of an honest confession. Remember Peter? Flash the sword and deny his Lord. The apostle that was boasting one minute and then bolted the next minute. The apostle that denied when he should have defended Jesus. The one who cursed when he should have comforted. Now we remember Peter's the one that turned and fled. But don't forget, Peter returned and he confessed, didn't he? He turned himself in and he opened himself up. He went back to the room where Jesus had broken the bread and shared the wine. Big burly Peter. He said, fellows, I've got something to get off my chest. Again, Jesus never demanded that we be sinless. He only says, be honest. Be honest. Be honest about your sin. Psalms 51:7, David wrote, you want me to be completely truthful. Why is it so difficult to be honest when it comes to admitting we're sinners and to admitting our sin? Why is it so hard to admit when we're at fault? Isn't it a strange phenomenon? Me a thief is we got a revolver in one hand and a bag of loot in the other hand. I'll never forget, I can never forget my sweet, innocent, blonde-haired daughter. So innocent. Walk in the kitchen, she's got a hand in the cookie jar, and I see her, she sees me. Leanne, are you taking a cookie without permission? Next thing you hear the clunk of the cookie on the bottom of the jar. No, Daddy, I'm not touching any cookies. Such a sweet, innocent look, you dare not even say anything, Sort of just melts you. No, Daddy. Well, it wasn't easy for Peter to fess up and be honest. It wasn't easy. He considered himself to be the MVA, the most valuable apostle. Wasn't he in the early draft picks? Wasn't he one of the chosen 3? Right? Didn't he confess Christ when everybody else was silent? Good old Peter. Peter never thought he needed help until he saw the look that Jesus gave him at that fire. Remember that? In Luke 22 it says, while Peter was still speaking, a rooster crowed. Then the Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. In that look there wasn't condemnation, simply pity. It was the look of a friend who just had his heart broken by another friend. Peter saw another hand being raised to slap Jesus in the face. But when he saw that look, Peter realized that he had dealt the hardest blow to the heart of Jesus that day. And it just caused him to flee into the night and to weep. In Psalms 33 it says, the Lord looks down from heaven and sees every person. From his throne he watches all who live on the earth. He made their hearts and understands everything they do. Like Peter, you know when God knows, don't you? You know when God sees. Your heart tells you so. Your Bible tells you so. Your mirror tells you so. Like 100, the longer you run, the more complicated things get, and the heavier the load gets. But sooner or later, we need to be honest with God. You know, if we were honest with God and He forgives us, our load can be just so much lighter. And there's someone here today, I'm sure, that's carrying that load, that backpack like the pilgrim in Pilgrim's Progress, just carrying an unnecessary load of guilt. Jesus said, whoever, that doesn't leave anybody out, does it? Whoever comes to me, I will not cast out. I mean, that included David, when his lie resulted in the death of 85 priests and their families. Even God was able to forgive that. Because David was a man after God's own heart. He was very quick to be honest about his sin and repent, confess. So fess up. Tell God the way it really is. See, only when you get a grip on God's grace are you going to be free to be honest with God. He's not going to smash you. He's going to accept you. He will not cast you out. Be honest with God. You can be free to be honest with God. You can be free to be honest with other people. You can be free to be honest with yourself. Honest to God. You will.